before there was science, before laboratories, theories, and experiments, there were questions. Questions whispered in the stillness of ancient minds. What is the soul? What is the mind? Who am I? In the marble courtyards of ancient Greece, beneath the sunlit columns of Athens, men like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle began a conversation that would never end. They sought not wealth or power, but truth, the truth of the human heart and the nature of the mind. They could not have known that their search, their philosophy, would one day give birth to a new science, the science of psychology. This is the story of how philosophy gave life to psychology, a journey across centuries, from wisdom to science, from faith to reason, from soul to self. The story of how humanity learned to study its own mind. Welcome to Psychology was born from philosophy. Here's how. Have you ever stopped to wonder where the science of psychology truly began? Long before the first laboratory, before the first brain scan, before we even had words like therapy or behavior, there was philosophy, the original search for truth about life, mind, and meaning. Psychology, as we know it today, did not suddenly appear in the 19th century. It was born from centuries, even millennia, of philosophical reflection. The earliest philosophers were not merely interested in stars or politics. They were obsessed with the greatest mystery of all, the human mind itself. The philosophical dawn, ancient Greece. Our story begins in ancient Greece, more than 2,000 years ago. Here, in the marketplaces of Athens, men like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were asking questions that no one had dared to ask before. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, believed that the path to wisdom began with self-examination. His guiding phrase, "Know thyself," remains a cornerstone of psychology today. He taught through questions, not answers, urging his students to look within, to explore their motives, beliefs, and emotions. Socratic dialogue was the earliest form of introspection, the same method that later psychologists would refine into a tool for understanding the self. His student Plato carried the torch further. In his dialogues, Plato described a world divided between the physical and the spiritual. He proposed that humans possess an immortal soul, the true seat of reason and identity. To him, the body was temporary, but the mind or soul was eternal. Plato's theory of forms suggested that reality as we perceive it is only a reflection of deeper truths, an idea that influenced later theories of perception and consciousness. In modern psychology, echoes of Plato's dualism live on in the ongoing debates between mind and body, thought and matter, reason and instinct. Aristotle, Plato's student, took a different path. He rejected his teacher's idealism and grounded his ideas in observation. For Aristotle, knowledge came not from the heavens, but from experience. In his work De Anima on the Soul, Aristotle examined memory, imagination, dreams, and emotion, topics that still fill psychology textbooks today. He believed the soul was not separate from the body but its function, like sight to the eye. This shift from spiritual speculation to natural observation was the beginning of psychology as a science. The soul in faith, medieval, and Renaissance thought. As centuries passed, the Roman Empire fell and Europe entered the Middle Ages. During this era, philosophy merged with religion. The mind was now seen through the lens of the soul and divine purpose. Saint Augustine of Hippo, one of the greatest early Christian thinkers, adapted Plato's ideas into theology. He described the inner life, memory, emotion, well, as reflections of the divine image. Augustine believed that by knowing ourselves, we could come closer to knowing God. His introspective writings foreshadowed the self-analysis methods that later psychologists would adopt. Centuries later, Thomas Aquinas merged Aristotle's ideas with Christian doctrine. He taught that reason and faith could coexist, and that the human mind was capable of understanding both natural and divine truth. His belief that knowledge begins in the senses, but is perfected through reason, directly anticipated the later scientific approach to studying human thought. During the Renaissance, Europe was reborn. Art, science, and philosophy flourished. Thinkers began to question long-held religious interpretations of the mind. Figures like Leonardo da Vinci dissected bodies to study the brain. René Descartes, a French philosopher of the 17th century, became fascinated by how thought arises from physical matter. The Age of Reason, Enlightenment philosophy. The Enlightenment was a turning point. The world was moving toward reason, science, and skepticism. Descartes famously declared, "Cogito ergo sum," I think therefore I am. With this phrase, he separated the mind from the body, proposing dualism, the idea that mental and physical phenomena are distinct but interact. This question, how can the non-physical mind influence the physical body, became one of psychology's deepest puzzles. The debate between mind and body continues even today in neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and consciousness research. Then came John Locke, an English philosopher who rejected innate ideas. He proposed that the mind at birth is a tabula rasa, a blank slate. All knowledge, he said, comes from experience. This view inspired empiricism, the belief that observation and experience, not innate ideas, shape our minds. Locke's empiricism laid the groundwork for behaviorism centuries later, where psychologists like B.F. Skinner and John Watson emphasized learning from the environment. David Hume, another British philosopher, took empiricism further. He questioned whether we could ever truly know ourselves, since our self is only a bundle of perceptions constantly changing. His radical skepticism anticipated later psychological ideas about identity, perception, and the unconscious. Meanwhile, on the European continent, Immanuel Kant responded to empiricism by proposing that the mind actively shapes experience. Kant argued that perception is not passive. The mind organizes information through innate structures, concepts like time, space, and causality. This philosophical insight deeply influenced cognitive psychology centuries later, when scientists rediscovered how the brain processes and structures information. The birth of psychology as science. By the 19th century, philosophy had provided the questions. Science was ready to provide the methods. In 1879, Wilhelm Wundt established the first psychology laboratory in Leipzig, Germany. He sought to measure consciousness, to break down thought into its smallest components, much like chemistry does with matter. Wundt's method, introspection, directly descended from Socratic questioning and Augustinian reflection, but now guided by experiment and precision. Across the ocean, William James, an American philosopher-psychologist, developed functionalism. He viewed the mind as an adaptive process, shaped by evolution to help us survive. James's masterpiece, The Principles of Psychology, blended philosophy and science, exploring habit, emotion, and the stream of consciousness. His work influenced later thinkers like John Dewey and even modern mindfulness practices. The rise of theories, Freud to behaviorism. In the early 20th century, psychology diversified. Sigmund Freud, originally trained as a neurologist, introduced the idea that much of human behavior is driven by the unconscious mind, by desires, fears, and conflicts buried deep within. His psychoanalytic theory drew upon centuries of philosophical reflection about the soul and morality, but reinterpreted them through science and medicine. Freud was, in many ways, a modern Plato, exploring the hidden depths of the mind that lie beyond our senses. While Freud explored the unconscious, others turned outward. John B. Watson and later B.F. Skinner rejected introspection entirely. They argued that psychology should study only observable behavior, not invisible thoughts. This behaviorist revolution reflected the empiricism of Locke and Hume, the belief that experience and environment shape who we are. For decades, behaviorism dominated psychology, producing powerful insights into learning, conditioning, and motivation. Yet something was missing: the inner life, the mind itself. The cognitive and humanistic revolutions. By the mid-20th century, a new wave began. Psychologists started to look again at the workings of the mind. This became known as the cognitive revolution. Scientists like Jean Piaget, Noam Chomsky, and Ulrich Neisser explored how we perceive, think, remember, and learn. They revived Kant's ideas that the mind actively structures experience and combined them with modern computing and neuroscience. The result was cognitive psychology, a field that treats the brain as an information processor capable of logic, memory, and creativity. Around the same time, humanistic psychology emerged through thinkers like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. They believed that human beings are not just mechanical systems or bundles of instincts, but conscious, growing individuals seeking meaning and fulfillment. This human-centered approach echoed the ancient Greek ideal of eudaimonia, the pursuit of a flourish in life. The circle had closed, psychology had returned to its philosophical roots. Modern reflections, philosophy, and psychology today. Today, psychology is one of the most diverse sciences in the world, from neuroscience and artificial intelligence to positive psychology and therapy. Yet, beneath all its methods and data, its philosophical roots remain alive. Modern psychology still asks the same questions Plato and Aristotle once pondered. What is the mind? Do we have free will? What is the nature of consciousness? Where does identity come from? Neuroscientists may use MRI scanners instead of scrolls, but the essence of inquiry is the same. Philosophy still guides psychology's deepest questions, while psychology tests philosophy's boldest ideas. Ethics, morality, perception, consciousness. These are not just scientific puzzles, but philosophical ones. Every therapist, researcher, and thinker who explores the human mind continues a journey that began thousands of years ago in the streets of Athens. So, when we say that psychology was born from philosophy, we mean it quite literally. From Socrates' call to know thyself, to Aristotle's exploration of memory, to Descartes' dualism, Locke's empiricism, Kant's rationalism, and Wundt's laboratories, the history of psychology is the story of humanity learning to study itself. Philosophy gave psychology its soul. Psychology gave philosophy its science. One seeks understanding through meaning, the other through measurement. Together, they form a complete picture, the heart and the mind, united in the endless search to understand who we are and why we think, feel, and act the way we do. The journey from philosophy to psychology is not just a historical transition. It's a living dialogue that continues today. Because every time we ask why we think, how we feel, or what makes us human, we are participating in that same ancient conversation, the timeless quest to know ourselves. From the ancient philosophers who asked why, to the scientists who learn it how, the search for understanding the human mind has never stopped. Each generation added a piece to the puzzle. Socrates' wisdom, Descartes' doubt, Wundt's experiments, Freud's dreams, and the countless voices who continued to ask the eternal question, who are we? Philosophy and psychology are not separate paths. They are two halves of the same journey, one guided by meaning, the other by evidence.